Working Fans Podcast. Cool.
Yep.
All right, here we go. Coming down 3, 2.
Welcome back for another week of the Working Fans Podcast. This is AJ. I'm the former wrestler. We've got Dave, the ultimate fan, here with us. As we do every week, our producer Joe likes to make us sound good and makes us look way more professional than we actually are. As always, you can find us on Twitter, that's @FansWorking, Facebook, Working Fans Pod. We've got email where you can reach out to us and please contact us to let us know what you think of the podcast and for any ideas that you might have. That's workingfanswrestlingpod@gmail.com. We're on Instagram where you can keep up with us at workingfanswrestling_pod. And then you can now listen to us on all major platforms, including Anchor.fm. We're on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Overcast, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, Apple Podcasts, and you can actually check us out on YouTube. Now, it's important when you go onto the Apple Podcasts and YouTube, hit that subscribe button, give us a rating, let us know what you think so you can help us out and we can continue to do what we love and bring you guys in as fans.
All right, everybody, welcome back for another week of the 531. We are actually recording. If you want to get a hold of us, give us your list, give us your comments. You can find us on Gmail at theworkingfans@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook, Dave and AJ Working Fans Wrestling page, on Twitter @FansWorking. I just fucking bumbled that whole intro. But Dave, how are you doing this week?
I was in wrestling. I'm like, yeah, he's shitting on this. Anyway, I'm doing good. Look, this is like the third 531 in a row we're recording today. Fucking hot. You know, we're bumbling shit. We're forgetting. Still working on new equipment. But guys, we're here working for you. And if you don't like it, whatever. Fuck it.
We're face to face. We're risking our lives for your entertainment. So if you want to talk some shit, I mean, go find AJ. He's training. He's ready to take you on.
Hey, the cat's over here looking at me.
Yeah, the cat is just done. He's on the floor. He's like, it's too hot. Turn on the fan. But Thor, Thor, we can't turn on the fucking fan. You'll hear it on the mics. This cat just walked out of here like he doesn't give a fuck about me. So the thing that we do give a fuck about is the top 5 wrestling cities. Now we got Scott from Voluntown gave us a list. He's got Chicago, New York, Philadelphia, Toronto, and Tokyo.
Chicago, that happened in town, that happened in town. A little Sammy Davis Jr., I think. Frank Sinatra? I don't know. It's one of the Rat Pack.
Chicago, that's going to come up on a lot of lists. New York, Philadelphia, obviously. Toronto, like I was saying earlier when this didn't record, not a town I necessarily would have thought of. But, I mean, you think about all the big...
And I was mentioning during that Edge and Cena had a wild match on there the crowd was crazy for. You were talking about TakeOver, where DIY wrestled the Revival. Also, I believe that's the one where Bret Hart had probably his finest moment in WCW where Goldberg speared him, and it turned out Bret was wearing like the protective metal armor shield, and Goldberg knocked him.
There's an ice cream truck. I think the neighbors are out there getting ice cream, so if you hear a little ding-dong in the back, that's what the fuck is going on. The cat is perturbed. Thor is back in here. He is not feeling it. I'm not getting you an almond crunch bar.
Speaking of little ding-dong, what's on Randy's list this week?
Jesus. Randy had Chicago, New York, Charlotte, Philly, and Atlanta. Jake brought us a list, and he's also got another pick that's outside of, what I'd expect for the regular. He had Chicago, Brooklyn, Philadelphia, Boston, and Tokyo.
Actually, Randy mentioned Brooklyn as a bonus on there, too.
Yeah, Randy had Brooklyn as a bonus, and that was interesting because Jake had it on his main list. And that's a town that, probably would have only popped off in the last, 5 years, maybe when...
Takeover's what I think about, too.
Takeover?
Yeah, fantastic.
Shard Johnson from the Rockin' Randy's Rockin' Wrestling group had Chicago, Greensboro, Atlanta, Tampa, and New York.
I am the man who will fight for your honor. Anyway, Chicago.
Chris Zauha, always going to be Zoucha, bud. I'm going to say it every time. from Rockin' Randy's Rockin' Wrestling Group had Chicago, Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York, and Toronto. Josh Dunn from Rockin' Randy's Rockin' Wrestling Group, friend of the show, former guest, had Worcester, Massachusetts, Philadelphia, Tampa, Chicago, and Voorhees, New Jersey.
Is Josh Dunn the interview that we fucked up on iTunes and we cut it off partly halfway through? I don't know if it ever got fixed.
That's a good question.
It might have been his interview, but it might be the episode.
I think it was the 531 there might have been an issue with. Josh Dunn just making a reemergence on social media lately, and we don't talk about it nearly enough. I mean, this is weeks ago now when you're hearing this, but he was off the Rockin' Randy's Rockin' Wrestling Group for a while, and the amount of joy that people showed when Josh came back, it had to have felt good. And it shows you those little things like Chris Zauha on Facebook and social media. It might just be like a 2-minute quick thing that they put on Facebook, but the joy that it provides people and just the laughs people get from both of them. I mean, Josh is inspirational too. But it's good to see him back. We just wanted to say welcome back, Josh Dunn. But
I'm watching a hell of a match with Donovan Dijak and Joe Janelle, and I'm thinking on that list we had, we were hiring AEW people.
How was Dijak not on the list? We are actually in the background right now. We've got Beyond Wrestling's Looking California on the DVD player, and Janela versus Dijak is putting on a hell of a match right now. This event actually started off with David Starr versus Jay Freddy.
It was already going on.
Yeah, very hard-hitting match. I'm only thinking about it now because it's flipped over. And two former guests. God. We've had... I mean, we're not to a year yet.
Toot our own horn. Toot, as the great Iron Anderson would say.
We will definitely, I assume, do a 1-year anniversary episode when we do it, but I'm really amazed at the people we've got. When you look back at the former guests we've had and be like, wow, we've talked to...
We have not done a repeat guest yet either, and I'm thinking about doing it at some point.
God, who is it? Jay Freddy was almost our first repeat guest when he took that nasty fall.
Stuff has happened because of like the COVID thing.
Yeah, we almost had Al Snow as a repeat guest, right? Oh, wow. But yeah, I mean, for a first-year podcast, I think we've been doing good. When you talked to JoJo, the producer, back before we were starting the podcast, what was that thing he said about wrestling podcasts?
Let's take a look here real quick. We can look this up, actually. Simple enough. I know he said a lot of them won't last. People just give up, so hang in there.
And I mean, to be honest, at times, it almost feels like we're speaking out into the bleakness of the universe.
Never pay a guess that sets a bad precedent. So he said September 29th, he said, by this time of year, I bet 1/3 of all wrestling-related podcasts are gone. The money is being spread too thin. Now, we ain't making no money off this motherfucker, but it's a blast. I love doing this. I want to keep doing this. Yeah,
it's almost like a hobby that's expanded just outside of a hobby, but not yet to a business. Because
and don't get me wrong, that's the goal at some point. Is to like hopefully get this thing popping off and just see where it goes. But right now, we're learning our trade. We're trying to constantly improve, and we're looking at different avenues, and we're trying to make connections out there with people too, and we're just seeing where it goes.
Yeah, because if you're getting into podcasting for the money, you really got to have a name going into it, and even then, you still got to hustle. Right now, we're just talking wrestling, probably like we would be if we weren't recording, but we're also getting to talk to wrestlers. We're getting to, I don't know, I think in some way add to the culture.
I don't know if it was going to be last week by the time this airs, but with George South interview I did recently, like when I talked to George, he is just so excitable. He's super like just happy to be doing this. And I'm on the other end. I'm by myself. I'm doing this interview. And I'm marking out. Now I'm getting fucking excited. And there's nothing that like really beats that for me. Like when I'm talking to these guys that I grew up watching.
Would you say it's Bobby Blaze level, like the interaction we had with Bobby?
Yeah, but a bigger, and this is not Bob. Bob's tremendous, but George has enthusiasm. Joe has not listened to this.
I haven't heard it yet.
Yeah, no. So like, we're going to basically edit that and help you out. But the enthusiasm that George has is just, it's tremendous. It made him one of my favorite interviews, actually.
We've definitely had a couple interviews that have been less than enthusiastic.
Oh, yeah. We won't name names, but there's a couple guys.
There's a couple.
You know what? He's up to some good quotes, though.
Yeah, I mean, we're not going to say his name, but he's off the hook now.
Yeah, let me tell you. When he's in the territory, it's territory, too.
Oh, God, yeah. It ain't a territory unless he showed up.
Yeah, right.
Now that we've gone a little off the list, I mean, it's good to... Yeah, I mean, we cut we had like a 6 o'clock time that we were going to end on, and we've blown by that. But I mean, that's how much fun we have when we actually sit around and start doing this. It's like, oh shit, this is why we podcast, for the conversation, for the fun. I've never looked at it as necessarily a way to get ourselves over or to get ourselves a job. Aside from Court Bauer. Court Bauer, if you want to hire us, we got an MLW review coming your way.
Me and Joe have never looked at this as a way to get ourselves over. By the way, shout out to AJ, who's not here with us. We all win at the end of the day. We're all the Working Fans podcast.
Oh, yeah, we're all working fans.
That's damn right.
Let's go to the top 5 wrestling cities. Yeah, we'll do AJ's list. His top city is Chicago. Montreal is number 2. Atlanta's number 3. The hotbed of Rochester, New York is number 4. And Cleveland is number 5. I've been to Cleveland for a pay-per-view. I saw Money in the Bank there, actually. That was actually a big trip because that was my first trip after finally being done graduating college 5 years ago. It took a little while. But my brother got tickets to the Money in the Bank 2015 show, I want to say. I want to say that was Ambrose. Ambrose is on the anniversary seat that I have downstairs. I want to say it's 2015. Also, NXT was just kind of touring around that time. They actually had come through Columbus. No, it was in Columbus that Money in the Bank was, because NXT was in the same city, and then we went to Cleveland for Raw the next night.
What was your favorite show? And it wasn't Raw, I'm guessing.
Raw wasn't bad. Money in the Bank, we were front row. That's the first time I've ever been front. Yeah, if you watch the pay-per-view, if you're watching the front row, we are all the way at the end of the screen on the right. We were on the corner of the barrier, so you'll see us from time to time in that show, but that was a real good time. NXT, they still hadn't fully popped off yet. They were just starting to do those weekend tours. So I want to say that Alexa Bliss was still with the tag team she was with. I want to say Blake and Murphy. Back when that was going on. I'm trying to remember all the people because NXT was at such a different spot at that time. I want to say that Samoa Joe had just come in the company. I want to say it was a triple threat match in the main event. Either way, it was amazing. But Fritz Grandi has a list, and I don't know if this was a mistake or he's trying to make a point. But that motherfucking ice cream truck. God damn, we're recording here. We're trying to be professionals. And this goddamn ice cream truck is making money off the kids in the Jewett City area. Back to Fritz Grandi's list because fuck ice cream. Number 1 and 2 on his list are Greensboro, North Carolina. I don't know if that's to make a point or he just flubbed it, but that once again is making me mad that I left Greensboro off the list.
I mean, that's Flair race, I just think about, especially Flair.
Yep. Memphis was his number 3. Couldn't believe I didn't put it on when you think about how hot Southern wrestling is in that area.
I saw how you interpreted this list. Like, me and Scott were talking about this a lot. Well, he's got one more city? Okay.
He's got Chicago and New York to round out his list.
Okay. And, like, I just want to say this, like, you know, like, for me, when I get to my list later, it's basically rabid crowd. I was looking for noise. But, like, then you wouldn't really probably put Tokyo on there. But Tokyo is such a historic wrestling city that you can see why people include.
I would argue they have a different type of noise because they more have the watch. Like, they're quiet, they watch. And then when something pops them, I believe MVP has talked about it and a couple other wrestlers, how there's a slow, like, oh, that you get almost a different kind of reaction. But when you get that reaction, it's notable.
You know, speaking of historic cities, I don't think it's made the list. I don't know if they will. Mexico City.
Goddamn, no, Mexico City hasn't. Even, I mean, shit, Tijuana at this point, between what the Crash has done there, multiple promotions. Yeah. Once again, it's a lot of where you think about it. I'm sure if we had maybe a couple more Latin American listeners, it would have popped up more on their list.
You're an old 2 AWA guy, Minneapolis. I don't know if Minneapolis will make some people's list, but...
Nah, it made nobody's, sadly. Or maybe it made a list that I fucked up on. Who knows? Mike Flynn's got a list for us. He's got Philadelphia, Toronto, Tokyo, Charlotte, and London. London, it's a surprising pick, but I like seeing that different people have these different world cities that catch them. I think sometimes these foreign crowds pop off because you see, like, WWE won't go there very often.
Right.
Then the one TV they have from there, people are losing their fucking minds.
And they don't get to go to a live crowd all the time. It's awesome for them.
True. Now, we already covered Randy's list. We got AJ's list. Zach had Toronto, New York City, Philly, Chicago, and Tokyo. Yeah, solid list. Jesse from New Hampshire, can't leave him out, had NYC, Chicago, Atlanta, Philly, and Tokyo. Dave, there's one person we don't have list from. That's from you.
Joe, did you put your list in?
Did I even read my list? I don't even know. Well, let's go with my list, because no, we definitely didn't read my list, because I've got Chicago, Tokyo, New York, Providence, Rhode Island, and Boston. Providence, just because, I mean, a lot of the Beyond Wrestling I've seen has been from Providence, and I think what Beyond has done between Worcester, Mass, and Providence, making a bit of a name for the city, I think.
A couple Royal Rumbles in there, too. That is the one where they killed off Undertaker and he rose to the heavens.
Yep, couple Royal Rumbles. I believe my buddy Jesse, not Jesse from New Hampshire, he went with his sister and I want to say his stepbrother.
The 40-man Royal Rumble?
I believe so. We'll have to... He watches us on YouTube. Not a wrestling fan, but he's definitely been to it.
Okay, so it's my time then, huh?
It's your
Time to shine.
It's your time.
My time's up. My time's now. All right. Number one on my list. I had to mention this city plenty of times in other episodes.
Jewett City, right?
Definitely.
For that pop in an NEW show where the winner of the main event was going to rename the town the fucking youth center.
Sounds.
A little surprise. Youth center name didn't change.
Alright. Fuck you, city. Chicago is my number one city. I mentioned that before in my Gary Capetta interview, how I always love Chicago.
I think you've mentioned multiple times how Chicago's a hot crowd because
never been there.
obviously they've been a hot crowd through time. I think we mentioned it with Zauha too.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, we did. Also, Calgary is number 2 on my list. Go watch the Calgary Stampede in your house event and watch the reaction for the Hearts versus, I want to say it's LOD, Gold Dust, Ken Shamrock, Steve Austin, and is that 5? Gold Dust, Ken Shamrock, LOD, Steve Austin.
Sorry.
Anyway.
I was just thinking because I wanted to mention that if anybody hasn't read Martha Hart's book, I believe it's called Broken Hearts. It is. I'm halfway through. I don't know if I'm halfway through it. I'm actually about to start the chapter about Owen's death.
Yeah.
Or no, Owen's funeral.
Okay.
She goes into heavy detail about the whole time. It's a very good book. And if you look at modern Jerry McDivitt comments where she wasn't involved or didn't seem involved in the investigation, I think he was trying to or I believe I heard he was insinuating, this book shows totally different. But it also gives you a good idea of how important the Hearts are in Canada.
Yeah.
So to see the Hearts wrestling Calgary, I've got to go back and watch that in your house. It's got to be out of hand.
It's tremendous.
So who do you have after Calgary?
I got New York / Brooklyn. Because at the end of the day, New York is the more historic city, but I think Brooklyn is maybe the one that's bringing a more enthusiastic, rapid crowd these days.
Yeah, and you kind of want to... The way that I hear connecting New York City and Brooklyn, you're not necessarily taking anything away from them, but it's almost like New York City was classically that go-to place.
Yeah.
And in recent years, Brooklyn has made itself more... It's made itself a destination as well.
Number 4 on my list. A city that surprised you in the beginning, but I think it's hitting over now. Toronto. I love those Canadian crowds. And number 5, talking about rabid crowds, how do I not include Philadelphia, home of the ECW?
That is a good point. Now that we're getting down to a top 3 list, Chicago.
Oh, Chicago's on the list.
New York.
Yeah.
Who goes in that 3rd spot?
It's going to be tough.
Philly's made a lot of lists. Toronto's made a lot of lists. Calgary's made a couple. Greensboro.
Well, I heard people mention Atlanta. Charlotte, too.
Charlotte.
Is there anyone that's really sticking out there that got a lot more votes than the other?
Toronto, Tokyo. It's like Toronto, Tokyo, Atlanta.
Okay. So, all right. So Chicago's in. Let's talk about
Chicago,
Toronto.
New York, I'd say are just easy ins. I'm gonna do New York. I'm gonna do New York / Brooklyn.
Okay.
Because when you bring that up, it just feels like a good one to include.
Okay.
I feel like Brooklyn's in the city of New York. Is it a borough of New York? Brooklyn, Bronx, the Queens, and Staten. From the Battery to the top of Manhattan. That's a rhyme from somebody, and that's how I remember the boroughs in New York. I'm sorry.
No sleep till Brooklyn. All right.
No sleep till Brooklyn, exactly. We're going to call it part of the city. If you're from the city and you dispute that,
So we got Brooklyn and Chicago right
Fans Working Fans Wrestling Podcast at gmail.com. Fill it up.
We got Brooklyn and Chicago right now. So.
Chicago and New York and Brooklyn are definite ends.
Okay, then I want to say...
So it's like Philly, Toronto.
Let's throw Toronto.
Go Toronto?
Have a Canadian crowd in there.
Because I feel like Philly's a good crowd, but
Yeah.
I mean that New York-Brooklyn crowd's almost equivalent.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Philly has more of the ECW fan base, so you
Because
almost
maybe
want to
that's
say like a more rabid crowd, but put anybody in front of a New York crowd and it could go wild.
I just feel like it's Canadian brothers. You know, they need to be acknowledged.
Exactly. We can't leave Canada out.
Yeah, I'll leave Canada
No
out.
matter what AJ says about them.
He's wrong.
And I mean, if you guys have been keeping the score, you guys know what Dave says about Canada, right?
Toronto, Brooklyn / New York.
We gotta choose a third town because we're hungry. Dave's got a UFC event to go to.
Probably heard this in the last episode too.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's what we thought we
How
were
many
doing.
UFCs this motherfucker go to?
Listen, guys, we're the Working Fans podcast. Wish I could say the name of my own fucking show. How many times have I busted you guys on fucking up the name of the podcast? Dave, who are we dropping first? Chicago, New York, Brooklyn, or Toronto?
So I want to get my Canadian brothers in there. They don't have the same historic significance of New York and Chicago.
Yeah, it's tough. Like, we want to include Toronto in there because they've had such good crowds, but...
Actually, I wanted to put Calgary in, but so many people voted for Toronto.
Yeah.
That's
And Toronto's probably had more of the bigger televised things from that.
But that Stampede in your house is still so legendary for a crowd.
Yeah, that's such a high watermark.
Yeah.
And probably, who knows, even Stampede Wrestling probably did good in its early run with the crowd, with the audience that it had.
The audience wants Chicago. Chicago is the town. They are absolutely bananas for WWE events, AEW events, old-time WCW events. You just look at raucous crowds, you're going to see a picture of Chicago.
And
They're
isn't it
passionate.
wild that Chicago would win top city on our list, which it's already won. We're not even going to debate this.
Number one.
But when you consider that New York has Madison Square Garden, the world's most famous arena, that should mean something. But you've heard multiple wrestlers put over when it was the Rosemont Horizon. It's been the Fleet Center. Stone Cold's talked about that particular.
Let me ask you this. Have you been to Chicago?
I have not been to Chicago.
I've never been to Chicago either. Alright? I don't think AJ's been. Why Chicago on this? Because they bring it that much. There's people who've never even been to Chicago. We're seeing the reaction.
True, and like when we had Zalha on that's traveled to Chicago, puts over the crowds. AEW chose it to host like the All In, the All Out events.
Yeah, All Out was,
It's gonna be what, their Labor Day town?
Pretty
Labor
much
Day is at the end of the
every day. The All In event is pretty much Chicago now.
Yep, and that's gonna be the end of summer event. Whereas Double or Nothing's Vegas, and that's I always fuck up Memorial Day and Labor Day, so I gotta remember which one starts.
I mean, we don't
summer.
know what's going on right now because now everything's just in Florida, maybe Georgia soon, but things could change and we'll get back to normal.
True, but yeah, they've
the idea.
kind of anchored it there. So Chicago's the top wrestling town.
I know. Let's close this bad boy up.
And I mean, guys, you know what the music means. That means we're done for another week of the 531. As always, find us on our email, workingfanswrestlingpod@gmail.com. We're on Twitter @fansworking. We're on Instagram, workingfanswrestling_pod. You got Dave and AJ on Facebook. You got Working Fans Wrestling Pod on Facebook. We're on YouTube. If you're a real life person that listens to this and you're not subscribed to our YouTube, help a brother out. We're battling some bots here. And as always, we just want to thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Guys, thank you for listening to the 531 here on YouTube this week. If you like what you hear, you can always find us on Anchor FM, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, and on the Apple Podcast where you can subscribe and also give us a 5-star rating. We appreciate you listening. We want your feedback, 531, and if you agree with us, if you disagree with us, we also want you to let us know, and let us know what your 531 would be. Come up with a top 5 and let us know, and we'll tell you why you're wrong. And in order for us to do that, please contact us on Twitter. We're at Fans Working. Facebook page, Working Fans Wrestling Pod. Email workingfanswrestlingpod@gmail.com. It's very important that you actually contact us on these platforms because we want this to be your interactive place to talk wrestling.